The beef war between the EU and US is an interesting case. What is the problem? The problem is represented by imports of EU beef treated with certain growth-promoting hormones. And the problem was also the consequence of consumer concerns about food safety arising from the first cases of the so-called mad cow disease in the second half of the 80s. In 1989, the then European Community decided to react to the presence of certain types of growth hormones in the US beef that were imported at that time. And basically, the European Community targeted this product in almost its entirety by banning its importation. The ban was subsequently amended by permanently excluding one hormone and temporarily excluding the other hormones. And so that gave rise to a dispute within the WTO in 1997. It was the so-called beef war. On one hand, the European Union claimed that those products were not safe, and on the other hand, the US sided by Canada, which also had imposed trade sanctions and import tariffs to the European Union. The main issue characterizing the dispute was the impossibility to determine with certainty the absence of risk for health, as hormone beef was considered to be safe or unsafe depending on the party to the dispute. Indeed, under the WTO rules, such prohibitions are allowed as long as the party imposing the ban provides scientific evidence to the effect that food safety is at risk. So the reference norm was Article 5 of the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement, the SPS, in particular Article 5 paragraph 1 and Article 5 paragraph 2 of the SPS. The WTO first ruled against the European Union, and in particular the appellate body concluded that the European communities did not actually proceed to an assessment of the risks arising from the failure of observance of good veterinary practice, combined with the problems of control of the use of hormones for growth promotion purposes. The European Union adopted a piece of legislation to amend the ban, while further studies were conducted, which led to the conclusion that the use of beef growth hormones posed a potential health risk. And finally, the EU reacted against the trade sanctions imposed by the US and Canada and triggered another dispute before the WTO dispute settlement mechanism. And in October 2008, the WTO issued a mixed ruling allowing the United States to continue its trade sanctions and allowing the EU to maintain its ban. So it is clear that a solution between the parties was needed. The US and the European Union in 2009, with a view to clarifying the matter, at least in part, decided to conclude a Memorandum of Understanding, which was amended in 2014. By virtue of the Memorandum of Understanding, the following points were agreed upon. First, US producers were granted additional access with no duties to the EU beef market for beef produced from cattle that have not been treated with growth-promoting hormones. Two main phases were drew down. Number one, the US reduced the volume of the sanctions imposed in the European Union, and the European Union permits a tariff rate quota for imports of 20,000 tons of untreated beef at zero duty. While in the second phase, the EU increases the permitted amount of imported beef to 45,000 tons. The US suspends the application of any additional import duties on EU products. In addition, the parties also accepted to suspend for the first 18 months any action before the WTO on the EU's compliance with the WTO's decision against the EU on this issue. However, that was just a provisional solution to the long-standing dispute between the parties. Not by chance, the United States frequently asked to set up a new legal framework applicable to the matter. And here we come to the envisaged agreement that was, in part decided upon by the European Council recently, because in 2019, 15th of July, the Council of the European Union adopted a decision on the signing of this new agreement. The negotiations had been conducted previously from October 2018 to February 2019. And the content of the envisaged agreement is the following. US exports of high-quality beef will be granted a quota of the EU's imports on that product. At the beginning, this quota will be the 40%, but in 7 years, it will grow to the 80%, so 35,000 tons out of 45,000 tons. It means that the US will benefit from a large portion of the EU's overall quota, which must be reserved at least in part also to non-EUS suppliers in light of the WTO rules. And this goal was of course reached by the European Union by renegotiating the import-export balance with our trade partners such as Australia or Argentina and Uruguay. Well, the conclusion of this brief intervention is about the precautionary principle, because focus on scientific evidence and precautionary principle is very important. I think that the beef war case shows the difference of approach in terms of the precautionary principle between the European Union on the one hand and the US and the whole WTO system on the other hand. Here suffice to recall that precautionary principle prescribes that measures to protect the environment and human health must be taken before conclusive scientific evidence on hazardous effect of certain activities or substances becomes available. But yet in 1997, at the time of the first decision of the appellate body of the WTO, these specific bodies stated that the application of the precautionary principle would not override the explicit wording of Articles 5, Paragraph 1 and 5, Paragraph 2 of the SPS. And furthermore, in 1998, this body also specified that it was not clear whether the precautionary principle was a general or customary principle of international law, as the then European Community stated and argued.